Sports Talk Live Buffalo is sponsored by Celino Law.
Welcome to Sports Talk Live. I'm Sports Director John Scott, joined by our Hall of Famer Vic Carucci. Paul Hamilton tagging in later as we get into the Olympic hockey, plus a possible flurry of action when the NHL trade freeze ends in a week. Bills training staff under fire by the players themselves. Vic and I will discuss that in a bit, but first we want to really start forecasting this Bills offseason. And Vic, let's start here. What do you believe should be the number one or the main priorities for Brandon Beane and this team in terms of the roster this offseason?
Yeah, I think it goes along with what has been said for the last couple of years, John. Wide receiver, they have got to have a number one. I can't accept any attempt to explain why that isn't the case. The everybody eats mantra, okay, let's forget about that. I know Joe Brady was the one who coined that as offensive coordinator. He's the head coach now, and I would hope, along with Brandon Beane, there is full recognition that this team has to have a true number one guy in its receiving core. You have a number one quarterback, one of the very best to ever play the game. You owe it not just to him, to your offense, to your team's ability to take full advantage of that and its general strength, which is its offense, by having that guy, obviously, along with other effective people. But they don't have that number one effective guy, and I believe that has worked against them in some of the bigger moments.
And Vic, I'll take it a step farther. I think the group as a whole needs some serious turnover here. Khalil Shakir, I think, is a very, very good slot wide receiver when his placement in the pecking order is slotted appropriately. If he is your 2 or your 3, as Cole Beasley was at the heyday of this Bills passing attack, I think that is where he can eat at his best. So I think you need to get someone in that top slot, and I think you need to infuse talent as well beyond just that in the wide receiver room. Edge rusher, to me, also a big priority as well. Bills, once again, already over the salary cap to start the offseason. So while there will be some restructures, Josh Allen seems to be the easy choice every single year, they are going to actually have to shed salary the traditional way, and that is by cutting guys here. What do you think, and who do you think are the possible cap casualties, Vic, as we forecast here and get closer to the beginning of the league year when they have to be cap complacent?
You know, it's a long list of players that fall into the category of expiring contracts, and that, of course, makes them vulnerable and puts the decision in the spotlight. All right, do we hang on to this guy? Do we move on? I'm thinking primarily of moves or departures on the defensive side because you have another factor there. And what's that factor? We know. A change of system to a 3-4 scheme. Jim Leonard, the new defensive coordinator, the whole philosophy of aggressiveness and attacking in the form of the base 3-4, which from a physical standpoint is different than the types of players. I'm talking about the prototype of athlete that this team had in the Sean McDermott 4-3 zone heavy type scheme. So guys like Matt Milano, Shaq Thompson, A.J. Epinesa, some of the low-hanging fruit, Jordan Phillips, Fedarian Mathis. I mean, these are names that are easy to sort of move on from. I think it gets maybe a little challenging. You could throw Taron Johnson easily on the list of people that from whom they could move on, but do you maybe move him? Do you find another place for a guy like that? I know that's something you wanted to talk about because that'll be a name. I think others that I brought up here have been sort of fait accompli, but you know, maybe there's another discussion with a guy like Johnson, and I'm not sure who else from the defensive standpoint falls into the category of a player you want to truly hang on to because they're going to help you out. I think a full-on makeover for this defense is going to happen.
Yeah, Dawson Knox, Curtis Samuel, Taylor Rapp, just to cut guys that are still under contract, that saves you $10, $15 million there. But as you alluded to, Taron Johnson is a very interesting case. I think it is unquestionable that he was not the Taron Johnson of old, the all-pro level. Naturally, he's getting older. Guys are going to lose a step here. The nickel spot is an interesting one in Leonard's defensive scheme. Not necessarily the guy that'll be on the field 90+% of the time as he was in McDermott's. You brought up a good point to me earlier today. Should we potentially be looking at Johnson still on the team, but in a different role and position?
I could see him playing safety, or at least this team taking a long look at him there. I think he has the combination of elements of a guy who, when he is playing well, when he is at his best, when he's healthy, covers and can give you that deeper coverage, dependability, but also to be utilized as a blitzer or as a simulated blitzer. I mean, there's a lot of different things. I think Taron Johnson's feel for the game, his instincts lend themselves to being that safety, which is as heavy a thinking position as there is on defense and helping to quarterback that group. You mentioned Taylor Rapp, and I think there's a great likelihood you're moving on from him from that safety spot. You're going to, it's always easy to say who they should say goodbye to, but who are they saying hello to? And we know Cole Bishop obviously has been someone they brought in as a premium draft pick, someone in the previous coaching regime that you could easily see the future. Does that future work as well with, with Jim Leonard and this new defensive look? And this is where I'd also say the nuance is going to be, John, with Brandon Beane. Remember, these are players he and his personnel staff scouted and understand and then saw the coaches bring along. But how do they sort of see the transition? And I think as much of any conversation they're going to have about who you need, who you want to fit your scheme, which is what, good personnel people do with their coaches, who fits and who's going to work out well. There's going to be some conversation, I think, about like a guy like Cole Bishop, who you would think there's no need or thought to move on from, but you want to make sure he's going to fit what you're trying to do.
Yeah, Taron Johnson, he would have to be a post-June 1st cut if they were going to go that route. Save over $8.5 million, but dead cap spread over 2 years, over 2.5 this year, 6.5 plus next season as well. Let's go on the flip side of things, because there are a long list of unrestricted free agents that the Bills are going to have to decide, do they try to bring them back or do they just say, goodbye, we're going to move on? And I think the biggest ones are on the offensive line in center Connor McGovern and guard David Edwards, because that group as a whole has been fantastic, Vic. What are your thoughts on the possibility and ability overall to bring back McGovern, Edwards, and if you're going to choose one, who would it be?
Yeah, well, this team included Josh Allen in the coach search, had him involved with the coach interview process at least, and it ultimately landed on someone he knew quite well and someone who was already in the building, in Joe Brady. But now I think you better make sure you've got him and his thoughts involved with this offensive line, because if you say goodbye to McGovern and Edwards, those are big pieces, leaving a room that already does not have Aaron Kromer as the offensive line coach. And I still think this could be as big as an outgoing move, if you will, on the Bills that they were going to feel, and not in the best way. This is one of the best O-line coaches around. I know they've hired a replacement for him, and maybe the next guy in line is going to do okay, but you've said goodbye to Aaron Kromer. These players were nurtured and brought up through his system and found their way in a very strong way in terms of this cohesion of this unit, the way it helped James Cook become a rushing champion. I don't know that the protection for Josh Allen was at its best, so maybe there's some talk and discussion there that they can get better. But you start dealing with a couple of key pieces, starting with the center. Those are big moves that I think are going to take a lot of thought.
Yeah, I would prioritize McGovern over Edwards, though. I think it'd be a home run if you could somehow keep both. Keep in mind they have youngsters like Cedric Van Pran Granger, who they've drafted and developed for a couple years. This is usually the succession plan to save some money. They have a litany of other free agents that are upcoming here. Names like Joey Bosa, AJ Epinesa, Daquan Jones, Matt Milano, Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer, Brandon Cooks, and on here. Any one of them, Vic, that you think would be a good investment to bring back here before they hit the open market?
I'm struggling with this, John, because again, from the names you mentioned on the defensive side, it's all about the fit. Is it really there? Joey Bosa, I think they squeezed what they could out of him, and it was clear at the very end, postseason especially, that there was just nothing left in that tank. And then physically, you mentioned Matt Prater, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what the kicking decision is. Does this team get back the healthy Tyler Bass and move on with him? There's already pretty big financial investment there. I know Brandon Beane is on record as saying that he's going to be the kicker. So I would guess, it's just a guess, that you're going to move on from Matt Prater and go with Bass. So that'll be a part of what could end up being, for the Bills, an easier decision to make. But look, there's cap room that has to be made. Yes, the cap is going up by $20 million plus. It's still not going to account for all the investment that I think is needed in what is clearly going to be a pretty big overhaul.
I'm slightly intrigued by bringing back Brandon Cooks. Obviously, he's at the center of the controversy that ended the Bills' season here. I liked what he could bring, and I think, again, if we're slotting that group at wide receiver appropriately, if he's 4 or 5, I actually really like that at what I would assume would be low cost. Finally, somewhat quickly, and we will touch on this again as the months roll along here, but how aggressive do you think Brandon Beane will be this offseason, whether it's trades, free agency, moving up and down in the draft? How do you think he's going to maneuver the next few months?
I would say, in order, the draft is probably where we're going to see the highest level of aggressiveness. Do you see him making a big spend in free agency? Because it's not just, or a trade, because it's not just acquiring the marquee guy. If that's what we're talking about here, it's also that contract that comes with a guy, or the new deal that the guy gets when he joins the Bills. That will be a pretty substantial challenge, and to make it all fit and to make him, the player, fit into this team. Because number one receiver, it's not going to be everybody eats. He's going to be the main eater. And then relative to anything else they do free agency wise, maybe on the defensive side, but D linemen, linebackers, how they fit the 3-4, who's available there. I know this is not an overly robust free agent market, generally speaking, but we'll see how that all plays out. I still think the draft is going to be the big place to go.
I think this is going to be a Stephon Diggs-esque type of a trade to get a known commodity at the wide receiver position. That's going to be my prediction as we move forward. All right, Vic, time to shift things over to the Olympics, where Tage Thompson and Rasmus Dahlin playing absolutely sensational. Paul Hamilton joining me with his thoughts on the hockey over in Milan when Sports Talk Live returns.